Welcome back to Newegg TV. I'm Carey Holzman. Have you ever seen a Z170 motherboard that can support up to 4 graphics cards? Well, we've got one. Joining us in studio today, direct from Asus, please welcome JJ. Hey JJ.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here, and I see we've got this motherboard, the Z170-WS. What's the WS stand for?
Workstation.
A workstation that can support 4 graphic cards sounds like a great gaming machine to me.
Yes, you're definitely right. In terms of actually the target market that we have for the WS series, it's definitely first and foremost something that we target towards prosumers and professionals, but definitely there's a good amount of actually users that are out there that really love the high build quality, the extensive expansion, the rich storage options from that kind of PC DIY and gaming community that also look towards the WS as something that they would want to build on.
So let's talk a little bit about that build quality. We certainly are familiar with the level of quality that goes into the ROG series of boards from Asus. This, as I understand, is a level even above that.
Yeah, in some respects, there are going to even be components such as this board does feature 12K rated capacitors. So when you consider that most motherboards out there on the market are using 2K rated capacitors, and then Asus really introduced kind of a blanket wide adoption of 5K across its signature series, this is over twice that. They also have very similar characteristics in terms of having higher tolerance to higher temperatures as well as lower temperatures. Their overall performance is extremely good. You also incorporate very high performance VRM components, because with these type of systems, once they're put together, you see that their uptime is in terms of the number of hours daily that they're going through, is quite a bit more than the traditional user. Some of professional users, though, could easily enter into 6 to 12 to even 14 hours of daily usage at heavy loads. So the components that we have on here are really designed to be able to meet that type of requirement.
What are some of the differences that this board has that the ROG series of boards don't have, apart from higher level of components?
Sure, I think it actually goes a little bit more into the way that the product's designed, and where this is really going to be weighted is going to be in the expansiveness of what we call the QVL, or essentially the products that are certified to be interoperable with this motherboard. And Asus does an extraordinarily high grade level of validation and interoperability testing in those type of components for our other boards. But for the WS series, we find that the usage of those users is quite a bit more advanced. So they might be putting in professional RAID cards, they might be putting in specialized InfiniBand cards, professional compute cards like Intel Phi, Tesla cards, things along those lines. And those type of devices have very complex what are called option ROMs. So when you want the board to essentially be able to initialize and work with those, the board has to be designed on a firmware level, as well as in some other ways to be able to actually support these. And so we go through a much more extensive level of validating these type of products to make sure that essentially it's plug and play.
All right, so we've established that the board is reliable and it has a high level of interoperability with other hardware. So it doesn't sound like this would be an ideal candidate for overclocking.
You would think that they're kind of exclusive in regards to overclocking, which can of course incorporate aspects of instability, which is something that you wouldn't want on this platform. But what we actually find is that there are professionals, as long as they can feel confident in the increases that are realized when overclocking, they actually are interested in it. So what we've actually done is that we have our 5-way optimization technology on this WS board. And so what this does is actually a number of different things. One is actually dynamic real-time CPU cooling specific overclocking that's actually validated and tested for stability, while also doing full fan calibration and even actually doing some power management savings for different types of devices, and can actually also even be tuned with what's called our Turbo app application. And this actually allows you to overclock, but conditionally. So let's say when you're going on the internet and just looking at different content online, you could have your system run 100% stock, but let's say then you go into your favorite editing application where you would benefit from having an increase in clock frequency. You can then actually go ahead and have the overclock take effect only under those conditions. The software set that we have, of course, integrates on a hardware level to be able to make all these adjustments in real time. It can be very customized, so they can really conditionally dial in how they want their overclock to occur, and of course that can all be validated to be able to be stress tested, which even can be defined by the user. They can stress test for, let's say, as little as a couple minutes, or they could stress test for 8 hours to really make sure that that final overclock is solid and stable.
So they can actually do overclocking on the fly.
On the fly, yeah.
No reboot necessary.
No, exactly. No reboots are necessary.
Now, because we're talking about a workstation board here, I have to assume there's no built-in Wi-Fi?
So we actually have dual Intel integrated gigabit Ethernet connections on here. So that's, once again, focused a little bit more towards that prosumer or professional type of the marketplace. We find that what they'll end up doing is that they have usually more LAN-equipped systems. And so maybe they need to transfer files from one system to another system very efficiently and effectively, but they don't necessarily want to compromise or affect the bandwidth and the performance of their connection that's outbound, so essentially going out to the internet. In other configurations, of course, they can do link aggregation, so if they want to tie them together to even be able to get higher performance, they could do that. You could also enable it for failover protection, so that if one were to fail, you then essentially have a backup. So there's a lot of different options. Also, one of them is what's called the Intel 210 AT series, so this is the professional series, which offers more advanced management options. The other, I think, big plus here, too, is that these also leverage the LAN guard design that was first implemented in ROG series motherboards, where the actual internal housing, the actual jack itself, is now produced on an SMT production process. So that affords us more space, more precision, more accuracy, and reliability for the jack, while also improving aspects of surge and ESD protection.
Now, it's my understanding that you can also prioritize the data going through those Ethernet jacks, is that right?
That's correct. The actual board does come equipped with our TurboLAN software, so this is a form of packet priority control software. A certain kind of example scenario that you might have is that if somebody was maybe uploading something to the internet for maybe cloud purposes, you would want that to take prioritization over, let's say, maybe just your web traffic or different things that might be occurring in the background, so you could go ahead and manage that.
Now, what kind of audio are we talking about being included on a workstation board? Is it a high-end audio?
We focused on really giving now the editors, especially out there in the community, where we're seeing so much more audio and video work occurring. So we have isolated audio here, we have a shielded ALC11 Audio 50 codec, we have audio grade capacitors, and we even have an operational amplifier and our depop filter. So that's all been put on this board so that the actual audio experience you have here is definitely improved upon that compared to a traditional motherboard.
Now, JJ, one of the things that's frustrating to me as a system builder is when I get a case that has like 5 fans already in it, and I have a motherboard that only has 3 or 4 fan headers. So how many fan headers does this board come with?
This board has 6 fan headers.
6 is a good start.
It's definitely a good start, but definitely this board can offer quite a bit more. So some of the really unique attributes that we've had on Asus series boards in the past continue to be here in terms of our Fan Expert 3 technology, which is pretty much the best fan control, flexibility, and functionality out there when it comes to motherboards. So every single one of these fan headers supports both 3-pin and 4-pin, or for some people they want to term it as DC and PWM-based fans. Every single header can be uniquely controlled within our software suite, or you can also bypass the software suite. You can do it directly from within the UEFI environment. What I think is even more impressive, though, is that every single one of these fan headers has full auto fan calibration. So that means that once you connect all your fans, doesn't matter if they're different vendors or they're all the same vendor, we can calibrate them and we can find out their minimum operating value and their maximum operating value.
Now that only works on the PWM fans, right?
No, it can actually work on DC-based fans as well. When you then use our actual fan profiles within the operating system, let's say you click silent, once it's been calibrated, it actually will turn it off. It doesn't just go down to a minimal RPM, pretty much will be turned off. But then, of course, when you jump into maybe a game or you jump into your editing application, all the fans will respond accordingly. Now, in terms of responding accordingly, you also have the ability that you can adjust the ramping speed for every fan, so that if you want it to be a quicker ability to be able to dissipate heat, but of course at the expense of noise, you can prioritize that. But you can also map to different temperature input sources. I'm sure when you've built systems, you've seen kind of really interesting configurations where you might have users that have 2, 4, 6, 8 hard drives, right, in one chassis. So in that situation, you might want to be able to take your thermal sensors from, let's say, the fan extension card or from an optional temp sensor and have those hard drives dictate when those fans essentially kick on. With our boards, you have multiple temperature input sources that are available to you to have those fans respond. And speaking of the fan extension card that we talked about, which I know you were a fan of, in that regard.
Fan of the fan.
Yes. You can, this board, while it doesn't come included with it, it does fully support it, so that if you want to add an additional 3 fan connections, you could do it from that card, and it also has 3 additional temperature input sources, or you could use it like a PWM fan splitter board and essentially have 4 fans connected to it. So a huge amount of fan flexibility when it comes to this board.
Yeah, it sounds like a total of 10 by my math.
That's correct.
Now, we mentioned earlier that this board can support up to 4 graphics cards in SLI or Crossfire.
That's correct. So this board is very special in regards that it has the ability to be able to actually offer up to 4 graphics cards, whether that's going to be an SLI or Crossfire. So if you're looking for the absolute highest level of GPU performance, it is available to you on this board.
Well, now on this side I can see we've got 6 SATA ports here, and it appears to be a U.2 connector?
That's correct. So we're offering pretty much the most flexibility you can have when it comes to storage. So you got your traditional foundation with serial ATA, which is great, but U.2 affords the users the fastest and largest capacity drives that are out there on the market. Even beyond that, we still even offer more connectivity and more expansion options depending on how users want to equip their setups, because this board has actually dual M.2 on board. And you can of course even RAID these if you wanted to. So if you wanted to go to really high performance levels, then you have that available to you. So this opens up some really interesting configurations where you can have like dual M.2, supplement that with larger capacity storage on the SATA, or maybe you have one M.2 and then a U.2 and then SATA. You've got a lot of different flexibility of how you can go ahead and create this, and there's even more that we offer once you go to the actual external forms of connectivity. So of course we're going to give you USB 3, but you're also going to get USB 3.1, both Type C and Type A based connections, so you're ready there. And you're also going to have full support for our Thunderbolt 2EX card. All the way around, when it pretty much comes to connections, you've got just about every single type of standard you would really want available to you on this WS board.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the USB port, because I see one right up here on the front. It's like an external USB port that's internal.
That's correct. It's actually a unique design that we generally have on our WS boards. This is once again really centered towards professionals, or which certain applications actually require like an authentication USB key. Some of these keys can actually be quite expensive. They usually have specific security protocols attached to them to
That's right, the
initialize an
software
application.
won't run unless you have the key plugged in. Somebody takes the key,
and you're stuck. Exactly, your application won't run. And so because of the expense and the nature of these, you don't necessarily want to leave them connected to an external port. So some users want to use an internal port, but we also have another segment of users, like enthusiasts or gamers, that sometimes just like to keep, maybe drivers or certain backup files, game saves, things like that, just locally attached on a drive that they always know is permanently there on the board. So you can use it in a lot of different ways.
That's a really neat idea.
Yeah.
Well, clearly the board is very feature rich.
Definitely
And I'm
is.
sure we're just scratching the surface on many of the bells, whistles, and features that this board comes with. But are there any others that are worth noting that we want to include in this video?
Definitely. I mean, there's quite a number that actually we still haven't even talked about, and I definitely would recommend checking out the product page for even more information, especially for things like our Key Express technology, which is really cool. But I think one of note is going to be our push notice. So this is actually an application that can work with the board. So if, let's say, all of a sudden maybe your fans stop spinning in your system, or you had a temperature trigger or something along those lines, you can receive a notice on your mobile app, so for like your tablet or for your phone. So essentially you could be aware that something is occurring with your system. So I think that that's a really nice feature to be able to have, especially with a board like this.
Yeah, it seems like it's a great way to protect your investment as well. Well, listen, thanks again for coming down today and explaining to us all about the Z170S motherboard from Asus. Really appreciate the info.
As always, it's been awesome being here.
For more great video content, be sure and check out our new video shopping platform at Newegg.tv. I'm Carey Holzman, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.